If you had your first panic attack in the car, or if you're experiencing panic attacks in general, chances are you're probably not driving. Or if you are driving, you're avoiding freeways and highways. Maybe this is something where you need somebody in the car with you in order to drive, or you start getting panic if somebody's in the car with you, and you're wondering, what can I do to make these feelings go away so that I could just go back to driving, being carefree, not really worrying about getting the next panic attack. Well, in this video, I'm going to share with you how to begin your recovery journey from overcoming panic attacks, specifically with driving. Now, driving is a very unique situation because it's an active participation. You're actually doing something. And what happens is when people have panic attacks, they're afraid of what happens if I lose control? What happens if I pass out? What if I get too dizzy? What if my vision changes? Because panic attacks are so physical. So what I'm going to share with you in this video is how to begin your recovery journey so that you can go back to driving, enjoying driving, and not really worrying about having these symptoms there. So let's get it started. Now, the reason why I wanted to make a video specifically about driving is because this actually affects a lot of anxiety sufferers. People that are struggling with physical symptoms, people that are struggling with panic attacks, depersonalization, derealization, the weird emotions, the intrusive thoughts, what happens if I turn left when I shouldn't, or anything like that. It really affects people's livelihood in the sense that it really reduces their quality of life. You might notice that anxiety permeates so many different aspects of life. Driving is one of the biggest ones. And you notice very quickly that if you're not able to drive, your life gets limited tremendously. You're not able to be as independent as you'd like to be. And what you might notice that you're doing now is you might be relying on friends to drive you or family to drive you, or you might be even doing lifestyle adjustments. You might avoid working in the office. You're just going to try to work remotely. Or if you need to go to the office, you might be taking longer to drive there because you want to avoid freeways or highways, because what happens if you can't escape? Now, the first thing I want you to recognize is that a lot of people think that driving itself is the problem. Right? That it's the fear of driving that's the issue. But that's not actually the case. If you're struggling with panic attacks while driving, you'll notice it's not driving that's the problem. It's what happens if I lose control? What happens if I get a panic attack? What happens if I can't escape while I'm in the car? And the ironic thing is when I'm guiding people through the recovery journey, one of the first things they tell me is, Shaan, I enjoy driving. Like, I thoroughly used to love driving. I used to be carefree and just drive anywhere, and I loved it. But ever since they fall into this anxiety cycle, ever since they started experiencing panic attacks, they're like, oh, well, now I don't want to go anywhere. Now I just want to stay home. Now, in this video, I'm really going to break down two specific things, which is number one, why are you getting panic attacks while driving? This doesn't have to be just isolated with driving, why you're experiencing panic attacks in general, but I'm going to focus a little bit more on driving. And then number two, what can you do to make these symptoms go away so that you can drive and not worry about getting the next panic attack because you're not really struggling with this? Now, if you're experiencing panic attacks, chances are when you got your first panic attack, you didn't even know it was a panic attack. You genuinely thought you were going to lose control, that something bad was going to happen. You may have called the ambulance. You may have gone to the ER. You may have just panicked because you didn't know what it was, and nobody really explained to you what a true panic attack was. And what happens after that is that your nervous system becomes sensitized. And what I mean by your nervous system becoming sensitized is when you're experiencing a panic attack. See, the purpose of having a panic attack is your body saying there's a major threat, we need to prepare Shaan for the worst case scenario. So you start feeling this rush of adrenaline, and because of that and other stress hormones, you start getting really intense symptoms. You might be getting symptoms that, oh, I'm going to pass out, or the room starts spinning. You might be getting vertigo. You might start hyperventilating. And you know there's no threat. But what ends up happening is the symptoms are so uncomfortable that the symptom becomes the threat in itself. And so what happens is when people are driving, oftentimes when they get their first panic attack, especially in the car, one of the things that happens when your nervous system gets sensitized is that it takes a screenshot of where you are. So if you're in a car and you get a panic attack, well, your mind is going to remember that. Your body is going to remember that. Now, why does it remember this? Well, you have to understand anxiety is about survival. And the idea is that what happens if you saw a tiger in a specific situation? Now you manage to escape. Now, what happens when you go into a similar situation? Well, your body and mind are really, really good at protecting you and keeping you alive. So even if you're in a similar environment, what your body and mind are gonna do is turn on this alarm system and say, hey, last time you were here, there was a tiger, you got away, high alert, high alert, high alert. And so what happens is when people are driving, when they get their first panic attack in the car, well, what happens is their body almost takes like a screenshot of it. So next time they go in the car, even though they're relaxed and they're comfortable, what happens is this surge of panic comes in and they don't know why this is happening. And so because they don't know what's happening or what to do to overcome it, what do they end up doing? People end up avoiding driving in general, right? Because if you're going into a situation that makes you feel really uncomfortable, well, the natural response is, well, then I just don't want to go into that situation. That's what anxiety is designed to do. It doesn't want you to go in the car. But if you notice, this is a false alarm, right? And a lot of times people get tricked into the cycle. They don't know what's happening and they start experiencing all these symptoms and then they start adding meaning to these symptoms because they're in this anxious state. And then what ends up happening is they say, listen, I don't want to experience this, so I'm just not going to go in the car. Again, your body cares more about keeping you alive. It doesn't say, I don't want Shaan to drive. I want to ruin his life. I want to really reduce his quality of life. It's just focused on, hey, is Shaan alive? We're doing a good job. So what is one of the first things you can do about going through this recovery journey? Well, the first thing I would obviously focus on is really understanding the mechanics of anxiety. The truth is that knowledge really does dispel fear. And a lot of the things that keep anxiety alive is because people don't know what's happening. And so it's really important to get educated on what's happening. And it's very simple. There's a few principles to keep in mind. One of it is, like I mentioned, is sensitization. The second thing is really understanding the fight or flight response and how that plays in and how anxiety can create different symptoms and how the recovery journey looks like. So if you really want to know how that works and how the mechanics of anxiety actually work, I'll put a link down below to a free ebook where I really break down the mechanics of anxiety. I think it's much better to read it because it gives you a good idea. It even shows you how to respond in certain situations. For example, panic attacks while driving. And what it will do is it'll give you a basic idea of what's happening. Because right now, the biggest thing is you're just lost. You don't even know what's happening, right? When people experience panic attacks and they just start avoiding driving in general because they're afraid they're gonna lose control, they really just don't know what's happening and they're just trying to do everything to avoid feeling the anxiety and in their minds, avoid hurting somebody. So the link is down below. Check it out. It really breaks it down. It's something that would have helped me on my recovery journey. So I just decided to write this out as a way to kind of give back and help people at least start their journey. Now, you might be experiencing a lot of symptoms while driving, and when you're experiencing a panic attack, some of the most common things I see is the fear of passing out. People are afraid that they're actually going to pass out, or they feel like they're going to lose control, or they feel like they need to escape something. Now, there's a lot of other symptoms people experience, right? Vision changes, they may experience intense DPDR. And again, it's really throwing all of these symptoms under the anxiety umbrella, but I'm really gonna talk about the most common ones. And the first thing I wanna talk about is the fear of passing out. Now, because panic attacks are so physically intense, one of the things you might be experiencing is this feeling like, oh no, I'm gonna pass out. You might be getting dizzy and you're afraid you're on the wheel, right? You're doing something active. You don't wanna just pass out and end up hurting yourself or hurting other people around you. Now, again, one of the reasons why this fear is there is because what people are doing is they're following their feelings. They feel like they're going to pass out. Now, anxiety recovery in general is not about following your feelings. In fact, it's about responding correctly, right? So, for example, you might be feeling something and you say, oh, I don't want to feel that, so you avoid it. Right? With anxiety recovery is actually the opposite. If you want to actually overcome these feelings and make them go away, you actually have to go towards them. Now, look, that's easier said than done, right? Now, if you are genuinely afraid of, I'm going to genuinely pass out, well, then you're not going to go towards these feelings because you don't want to risk it, right? And that's why I mentioned it's so important to understand the mechanics of anxiety first, really understanding how anxiety works. Because the truth is, if you understand how anxiety works, you'll realize you don't pass out from this. Yes, you might be getting intense feelings of passing out, but the truth is, what's really happening is that your blood pressure is actually going up from a panic attack, right? And the reason why your blood pressure is going up is because blood flow changes because your body is gearing up to fight something or run away. Now, what you were experiencing from that change of blood flow is you might be feeling this dizziness or this feeling like you're going to pass out. But the truth is that your blood pressure is up. Passing out happens when your blood pressure drops. And what actually happens is you end up passing out when blood pressure drops. Now, why do you pass out when blood pressure drops? Well, the idea is that if your blood pressure goes low, you're not getting enough blood and oxygen to the brain. So what your body does is that it makes it parallel to the ground so that blood flow can be in the brain. But this is not your issue. Your issue is actually your blood pressure is going up because you're experiencing panic. So what do? Well, recognize that what's really happening is that even though you feel like you're gonna pass out, you won't actually pass out. And it's always a good idea to get a clean bill of health from your doctor, making sure you don't use these videos as a substitute from getting, a medical diagnosis and getting everything ruled out by your doctor. But the chances are is that if you're watching this video, you've already gotten everything ruled out by your doctor and you're healthy and you're good and it's just anxiety. So recognize that you were never going to pass out. What you were afraid of was a feeling. And so what happens is that when you start recognizing the mechanics of anxiety, which is, hey, I was never going to pass out. This is just an uncomfortable feeling. Well, then what is there to do? Well, the thing to do is not resist these feelings, because it's actually resisting these feelings that's keeping the cycle alive. See, your body only cares about survival, right? So if it notices that Shaan is avoiding something, well, then it's thinking, well, Shaan's avoiding something because there's a threat. And I want to protect Shaan from a threat. And if he's avoiding something, it's probably dangerous. So what happens is anytime he avoids, what we're going to do is reinforce the cycle. So if you really want to break the cycle, you just let the symptoms be there. And what happens over time is that as you start going back to driving, you start noticing these feelings come up, but all you need to do is just let them pass. You just focus on enjoying the drive the best you can, keep driving. And what that does as a consequence is it starts teaching your brain, starts teaching your nervous system, hey, there's really no threat. Maybe this is an alarm that's a false alarm. We don't need to keep triggering because look, Shaan is alive, he's not reacting. Maybe we need to recalibrate. And what happens with the recalibration is that your nervous system desensitizes. It ends up shifting from this fight or flight response to this natural rest and digest, which is what you were experiencing before you had panic attacks while driving. Now, the last symptom that I want to mention is this feeling of wanting to escape. And this is one of the reasons why people avoid freeways and highways because, well, cars are moving really fast. And what happens if you need to get off? What happens if you feel panic and you need to leave? Right? You're on a highway, you can't escape. So what people end up doing is they end up avoiding those things. And so the first thing I want to describe is why are you experiencing these feelings of needing to escape? Well, here's the thing. Anxiety doesn't like you being in small spaces. It doesn't like it when you feel trapped. And when you're in a car, you're in a small environment. Even though you have windows and stuff like that, you're still a little bit trapped and you can't just hop out of the car whenever you want, right? Especially if you're going full speed. And so what people end up doing is they end up feeling that anxiety when they're in that car and recognizing that what you're experiencing is totally normal. Again, anxiety likes you being in open places. It wants you to see the whole field. It wants you to see and scope out the whole area. But if you're in a confined place and you can't escape, anxiety doesn't like that. Now, the second thing I want to mention is really asking yourself, taking a quick audit and saying, well, from everything that I've learned in this video, why would I need to leave? Why would I need to escape, right? You have these feelings of escape. Well, I want to ask you, what are you escaping from? And what you're going to end up finding is you're actually really, once you find the answers, actually, I'm escaping the panic feelings. That's what I'm really running away from. This has nothing to do with the car. This has nothing to do with driving. It has everything to do with the fact that I don't want to feel this way. And so what I end up doing is leaving. So keep in mind that what you're really avoiding is a feeling. Yeah. And so what do you end up doing with the feeling? Well, like I mentioned earlier, what you want to start doing is you just want that feeling to pass. You don't need to do anything about these feelings. So to sum it up, when you feel like you can't escape, recognize that's a natural consequence of anxiety. Why? Because anxiety doesn't like it when you're in small spaces in general. And then number two, when you get these feelings that you want to escape, well, escaping from what? You're just really running away from a feeling. Right? And these feelings you start realizing are not true. You're not going to lose control. You're not going to pass out. You're not going to harm anybody. It's actually just anxiety burning itself off. But what happens is people start believing these things, and because these feelings are so strong and they start believing in it, what they end up doing without realizing is reinforcing those feelings. So when you realize there's no need to escape, what are you running away from? Well, then when you're driving on the highway or when you're driving on the freeway, it's not a big deal. If you even have the feelings, It's just a feeling. You don't need to physically react to every internal feeling you're having. Now, obviously, this is easier said than done. This takes practice. As we're guiding people, especially while driving, it does take a little bit of time because your nervous system is very stubborn. It wants to protect you and it wants to double check and triple check and quadruple check and making sure you're alive, you're healthy. And so it takes some time. So this isn't something that happens overnight. It takes practice, it takes consistency. And one of the biggest things we found is really being around people that have overcome this to guide you throughout the process. The truth is, a lot of my coaches, Kaylee, Caesar in particular, these guys were struggling with panic attacks while driving. They were experiencing DPDR while driving. Shiv, I think, was a little bit similar to when I was guiding him. I've helped so many people I don't even remember at this time. There's so many people that's like recovered from it that I kind of forget their stories a little bit. But the truth is that, there was so many people that just weren't able to drive, and now they're doing cross-country trips. They're like traveling the world. Like, we have clients that were not able to leave their homes, and now they're actually doing cross-country drives. It's amazing. They're like going to different national parks, and they're like driving everywhere, and nothing stops them, and they're enjoying living again. Because they understood how the mechanics of anxiety work, they started focusing on the response. They were with people that were guiding them through the process, and they just got better and better until they no longer needed us or even the mentorship in general because, well, they knew everything that they needed to know and their nervous system desensitized and the symptoms went away. So again, I hope this video helps. I hope it brings some clarity. Again, it's going to start you on the recovery journey. There's a lot of things behind the scenes to work on as well. And so if you really want to focus on recovering, I always say find somebody who understands what's happening and guides you through the process. Yeah, it's going to be a practice. It's not going to be overnight. And if you want that to be me and my team who are helping people around the world going back to driving, well, you can go ahead and click the link down below and apply for mentorship. When you apply for mentorship, what we really want to do is we want to take a good look at your situation, see what your biggest obstacles are, and see if the mentorship is really the right fit for you, if it's something that can actually help you on the journey. Yeah, and even if it can't, we'll point you to the right resources, but it's really focused on committing yourself, to overcoming this. And if you want to just go back to looking at these videos and try to figure it out on your own, that's fine. There might be some mistakes made, but again, it doesn't matter. The focus is on recovery. But if you really want to expedite this process and you really want to focus on long-term freedom and getting out of this as quickly as possible and being around people that know exactly what's happening, where you don't have to play this figure it out game, well, I would highly recommend applying for mentorship, or if anything, finding somebody who's gone through this, who helps people with this to guide you on the journey. So with that said, I'll see you in the next video.